Namji Dola Penjir Sanje Dobar Sho Sangye Chedan Tsogi Chonam La Chancho Bardo Dane Chabsum Je Daki Jinsogi Pesanam Je Dola Penjir Sanje Dobar Sho Sangye Chedang Tsogi Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dane Chabsum Je Dake Jinsogi Pesanam Je Dola Penjir Sanje Dobar Sho Sangye Chedang Sogi Chonam La Chancho Pardo Dane Chabsum Je Dage Jinsogi Pesanam Gi Dola Penjir Sanje Dobar Sho Semjen Tamje Dewa Tan Dewe Judan Dembar Jurchik Donga Da Donga Ji Judan Dalwar Jurchik Donga Mebe Dewa Tamba Tam Minrawar Jurchik Niden Chatan Nidan Rave Danyon Shambola Nebar Yorche. In the Dharma Expanse Palace of Akanishta is the essence of all Buddhas of the three times, who shows me directly my mind is Dharmakaya. I prostrate to the glorious exalted Gurus. Please bless me and all sentient beings that our minds become the Dharma. Please bless us that the Dharma becomes the path. Please bless us that the path dispel confusion. Please bless us that confusion arise as wisdom. And now think to yourself that we must do everything we can to bring all sentient beings, all of whom have been our mothers, to the state of completely perfect enlightenment, the only state that is true and lasting happiness. And in order to do that, we have to meditate. But if we're going to meditate, we have to have a proper understanding. And so in order to gain the proper understanding, we have to listen to the Dharma and contemplate the Dharma. So think to yourself that this morning that this is the reason why you are listening to the Dharma. And the Dharma we are listening to is the treasury of Abhidharma by Vasubandhu, as explained by the 9th Karmapa Wangchuk Dorje in his commentary, Youthful Play. Of the 8 chapters, we are on the 5th, the teachings on the kernels. We just began it, of course, yesterday morning, so today is our 2nd teaching. This chapter on the nature of the kernels has teachings on the kernels has 3 parts. There's the teaching on the nature of the kernels. There is the what discards the kernels, and then the results of discarding the kernels. So there are the 3 main sections, and of the 3 main sections, we've just begun the 1st. So we're talking about the nature of the kernels. And when we talk about the nature of the kernels, then there are 2 basic parts to it. And the first is very short. The first is basically just teaching how the kernels are the root of existence. In other words, saying it's because of afflictions that we accumulate karma. And because of karma, we then exist in this world. We become and exist in the world. So that's the first section, teaching that the kernels are the root of the afflictions. The afflictions, the manifest afflictions that actually motivate us to do action, come out of the subtle dormant afflictions or kernels that are in our being. As long as we have those kernels in our beings, then there's always the danger that they'll develop into full-blown afflictions and will act on them, perpetuating existence. And when you perpetuate existence, then you perpetuate suffering. So that was the first part, teaching that the kernels are the root of existence. So once you understand that the kernels are the root of existence, you need to understand, well, what are the kernels? And so the next section is understanding the kernels themselves. So this is the part that we started yesterday. And there are three parts. There's the classifications of the kernels, there's how the kernels arise, and then there's the enumerations of the kernels. So the classifications of the kernels are, as we started talking about yesterday, talking about, well, what are the different types? We can talk about them roughly in terms of 6. So that's the first part, the general classifications. So in the general classifications, there's classifying them as 6, classifying them as 7, classifying them as 10, and classifying them as 98. And if you want to go further, you can classify them in the hundreds, or really the afflictions are limitless in all their various. But what we need to focus on, we need to think about, why is it important to classify the afflictions? So when you classify the kernels as 6, you've got what? You've got desire, and likewise anger, ignorance, pride, and doubt, and view. Or is it view and doubt? The order is different in this verse. So you've got those 6 basic kernels. These are 6 basic things, and there are 2 points to understand here. This is just kind of teaching the general type of aspect, or the general type of the kernels. And these are not like a single thing. Actually, each of them, there are many different types of desire you can have. There are many different types of anger you can have. It all depends on, you know, what level you're in and what you're focusing on. So the focus, in other words, what you're getting angry at or why you're getting angry. There is whether you're on, what level you're on. With anger, of course, you're in the level of desire, the desire realm, and then also the different other aspects of it. What type of anger, when is it discarded, and so forth. And so when you look at it, you've got the big categories of desire, anger, and so forth. But actually, each of them is many different parts that are put together. And so when you, or many different subcategories. And so when you start to look at subcategories, there are different ways to look at them. And that's how we get all the different numbers of different afflictions. So you divide desire into 2, the desire for desire, that is the desire of the desire realm, and the desire for existence, which is the desire of the attachment to the 2 higher realms. Or you can divide them as 10, which is when you have the 5 non-views, that would be desire, anger, ignorance, pride, and doubt. And then the 5 views, which are personality view, extreme view, wrong view, overesteeming the low, and overesteeming discipline and austerity for 10. So those are 10 sort of categories. So these are, again, looking at them kind of like by their aspects or their type. What kind of thing are they? But you can also look at them in terms of, well, when do you actually discard them? How do you discard them? When you want to know how you discard something, you've got to know, well, when do you discard it? And so this is when we sort of look at it. Actually, there are different types of desire and so forth. And in general, we can talk about it as 2 types of desire. You've got the more, what do we say, the sort of more surface level of desire. I'm using, this is not the technical discussion. I just have to be completely honest about that. This is not a technical way of saying it, but I think it might help us understand it. There's kind of a surface level of desire where you're kind of thinking about it in terms of an individual self. It's kind of, all your desires are based on the idea of a me and mine. And so those are kind of coarse desires. They're not so deep. They're a lot of, and to a large extent, they're kind of learned. You learn, oh, someone teaches you, there's an individual self. They might call it an Atman, and they might call it a soul. They might call it whatever they want to call it in their particular tradition. But there's this idea of a me, and based on that idea of a me, you have certain types of desires that develop. And so those are easier to discard, because when you see that there is no me, which is like the first step on the noble path, once you see there is no me, then at that point you see, okay, that desire just no longer arises, because you don't have the basis for it is gone. It's based on an imaginary idea of me and mine, and so therefore it's gone. So these are what we call the discards of seeing. Just seeing the 4 noble truths eliminates those. So that's the first category, discards of seeing. And then the second category is the discards of meditation. So the discards of meditation are the ones that are a little bit more deep-seated. They're like looking at not just an idea of me, but you're actually like thinking about like, I'm hungry, I want food. You've got this sort of feeling that's kind of real. At least in the Great Exposition School, they consider it real to a certain extent, right? So you're looking at the actual basic dharmas of the basic phenomena of our existence, not an idea, but you're looking at a deeper level. These are more deeply entrenched, and so they take longer to get out, so you have to remove. So you have to go through the path of meditation, which is much longer. Now, the path of meditation divides them into 81, but we're going to leave that. Forget about that for right now. Just going to consider all the kernels of all the kernels that are discards of meditation in one category, right? But when you have the discards of seeing, those are discarded in 4 general stages, because you see the 4 truths in 4 stages. So first, when you achieve the path of seeing, what you first see is the truth of suffering in the desire realm. And when you see that, then all of the discards of seeing of the desire realm are automatically gone, because you've seen the truth of suffering in the desire realm. And so all of those are gone. So that's the 10 that we talked about. Maybe I should show that to you now, just so we can see. We've got the 10, just to go over these 98. Okay, so here we are, we've got 10. We've got the 10 of the truth of seeing. So you first see the truth of seeing in the desire realm, and you see those 10, and you see the truth, and that eliminates all of the desire, anger, pride, ignorance, and the 5 types of view related to that. That gives you the 10, right? Then you see the truth of suffering in the upper 2 realms. And I could show you those charts right now, but it'll just going back and forth on the computer will just take time. So you see them in the higher realms. In the form and formless, there's no anger, so it's 9, right? So that's the truth of suffering. Then you see the truth of origin, and you first see the truth of origin in the desire realm, which is where we are, right? You see the truth first where you are. And then that eliminates the 7 that are in the desire realm. That's because there are only 7, because some of the views don't apply to the truth of origin. The personality view and the extreme view, once you have seen the truth of suffering, those are just totally gone, according to the Great Exposition. And overesteeming discipline and austerity doesn't engage, it doesn't look at the truth of origin, so it doesn't count here, right? So that's why you have 7. And then you see the same thing in the 2 upper realms. Once you realize it in desire, you realize what? It's the same in the form and the formless realms. And that eliminates the 6 in the form realm and the 6 in the formless realm. And then that means that you've eliminated another 12. So 6 in each of the upper realms. And then you go through and you have the same thing with cessation, where there's 7 in desire realm and 6 in each of the higher realms. And then in the truth, when you see the truth of the path, you see it first in the desire realm. And at that point, you'd eliminate 8. So the personality and the wrong view are gone, because they're eliminated when you see the truth of suffering. But the overesteeming discipline and view, that engages the truth of suffering, and it engages the truth of the path. So you also eliminate it here. And you do the same in the upper realms, where there are 7 in each. That is the 8 minus anger. And so that gives you the discards of seeing. So in the discards of seeing for the desire realm, there are 10 of truth, 7 of origin, 7 of cessation, 8 of path, or 32 total. So this is kind of classifying them by which stage of the path of seeing you discard them by. And so that means that you eliminate 32 of these kernels in the path of seeing. Then once you've gone through it in the path of, gone through all of those in the path of seeing, then you have what's called the path of meditation. And on the path of meditation, you gradually discard the 4 of the 4 discards of meditation. So that would be desire, anger, pride. Wait a minute, I'm not looking at it. Desire, anger, pride, and ignorance. My Zoom is kind of covering that up, so I'm not looking at it. Those are the four, aren't they? Anyway, the four discards of meditation. And then after that, you then do, and you do that for each of the 9 levels of samsara, the 1 of desire realm, the 4 of form, and the 4 of formless. So you've got 9 levels. And that's how you divide it up even further. But in general, here we're talking about the discards of meditation as 4 for the desire realm, 4 for the form realm, and 4 for the formless realm. So these are ones that are kind of focused more deeply, and they take a longer time to get out. It's like the analogy I mentioned yesterday of like you have a really filthy cloth, and as you scrub and scrub and scrub, you have to scrub it harder and harder, and scrub it and use more powerful soap. And eventually, you have to use bleach to get the last one out. You just, after you've done enough other detergents, you just have to, at some point, you have to use the bleach, and that would be like the Vajra, like samadhi, that totally purifies everything remaining, and then you're an arhat. Is basically how it works. So those are the discards of seeing. So that you have the 36 kernels in the desire realm, which are here, and then there are the 31 kernels in the form realm, which are the same as the 36 in the desire realm minus the 5 angers. And you've got the 31 kernels in the formless realm, which are the same categories or the same names as the categories in the form realm. They're different because they're focused on a different realm. When you have the desire, in the desire realm, you're focused on the coarse physical pleasures of the desire realm. When you're in the form realm, you're focused on the pleasures of the dhyana meditations, and there's a sense of a form and of a subtle body at that point. When you're in the formless realm, then there is no sense of a subtle body, but there is still attachment to the pleasures of meditation and so forth. And so there are different levels of attachment, okay? So these are the discards of the different desire realm, of the different realms. Let's see, where I go. Oh, how do I get out of here? I'm trying to escape this. Stop share. Okay, there, now I've got that. So that's kind of a review of where we were yesterday. So when you first talk about dividing the kernels into 98, it sounds like, oh my gosh, this is so much. It's so difficult. How am I ever going to figure this out? There are so many different numbers of these kernels. What does this mean? Well, you have to think about it. So I have shown you these charts, and I considered sending you copies of the charts, but I decided not to. And here's the reason why. The reason why is that if I send you the copies of the charts, you're going to look them and it's going to be knowledge up here in your head, right? So now what actually you need to do is you need to just look at this and look at the verse and look at the commentary. And if you want, make your own chart. It doesn't have to look anything like my chart, but to make your own chart and figure out, and as you put each little check, oh yes, I've got desire on this column, I've got desire in that column, and that, then you think about, why do I have desire in that column? Why do I have views on this column? Why do I do this? And if you do that and make your own chart, then you're going to learn it better. So that's the reason why I'm not sending the charts. I'm not going to check your work. I'm not going to make you all do your charts. Last year in the course, I had 4 hapless students here, 4 members of my studio audience, I call them, who had come with me, arrived with me as refugees from the Shedra. And so I made them do all the charts last year. This year, I haven't got anyone. So I have to... I have to make them on PowerPoint myself, but still, I think there's a lot of benefit for all of you to learn these all on your, to study them and learn them on your own. So that is that's basically a review of where we were yesterday. And I went through it just because it was like the first day and we already got slammed with this huge number of kernels. And so it might've been a lot. So I went over it again briefly. So those are the 10 types of the kernels that we're speaking about. We've got the discards of seeing, the discards of meditation. Those are the 2 main categories, and the discards of seeing are divided into 4 because you see 4 truths: suffering, origin, cessation, and path in each of the 2 realms. So that gives, or each of the 3 realms, and so that gives you 3 sets of each of the discards, right? So that is how it gets to be so many. So now we have the question is, well, you have the discards of seeing, right? Do you have to see the noble truths in order to discard them or not? In other words, can you discard them if you go to, I'm going to say a Hindu ashram, because that's the tradition where they practice jhana meditations. I'm not picking on Hinduism here. Actually, there might be some other Christian meditations where you achieve similar states or so forth, or maybe some shamanistic, I don't know, but I'm going to use a Hindu ashram for right now as the analogy. If you go to a Hindu ashram and they teach you that if you achieve dhyana, you can eliminate all of the afflictions. Well, can you actually do that according to us Buddhists? So this is what we're speaking about in the next point. And this point is in the middle of page 393. If you're looking at the book, it is the point called additional point. So here it is. The additional point. The additional point reads, the peaks that forbearance destroys are discards just of seeing, on others of seeing and meditation. What forbearance does not destroy are just of meditation. So here, this is another very cryptic sounding verse. So even though it sounds cryptic, it's actually not as bad as you think it is. One moment, I've got to rearrange things on my screen. Okay, so I can see everyone and see the text and everything else. So here is the peaks that forbearance destroys. So what the peak means, it's the peak of existence, which is another way of saying the fourth level of the formless realm. That is the highest level in the three realms of samsara. You've got the desire realm as the lowest, then you've got 4 levels of form, and then you've got 4 levels of formless, and so the highest is the peak of existence. It's like the top. Of course, it's not got a place because it's in a formless realm, but we call it the peak of existence. So on the peak of existence, there are discards of seeing, and those discards of seeing are called in the first level, in the first line here, they're called the peaks that forbearance destroys. In other words, the discards of seeing that are discarded by a type of meditation called forbearance. We will talk about forbearance in the 6th chapter in more detail. But here, when you talk about forbearance, what we mean are what forbearance destroys are the discards of seeing. Forbearance means when you are just about ready to see the truth and you actually can bear the sight of it. Before that, you can't quite stomach the sight. You might think you want to achieve the 4 noble truths, but you can't quite bear it yet. So when you get to the level of path of seeing, then you can bear it. There's a certain wisdom that appears. You can bear it and you see the truths. And that moment when you see that is called forbearance. It's followed by a moment of knowing, which is like the recognition of that. So the forbearance means the moment on the path of seeing that you are, the moments on the path of seeing when you are actually discarding the discards of seeing. So here we're talking about the discards of seeing on the peak of existence. Those are only discarded by seeing. On the other levels, there are discards of seeing and of meditation. So on any other level, that would mean the desire realm, the 4 levels of form realm, and the first 3 levels of form. They can also be discarded by the meditation path of meditation, by the worldly path of meditation. So we have 2 types of paths of meditation. There's the worldly type of path of meditation, which means the meditations of non-Buddhists. These are the dhyana meditations and the formless meditations practiced by non-Buddhists. They can eliminate the discards of seeing temporarily. They are eliminated, but they will re-arise because it's a worldly meditation. Or they can be destroyed by the noble paths, which means by the path of seeing. So that's why it says on others or on other levels, the discards of seeing can be just eliminated by the path of seeing on the noble path and the path of meditation on the worldly paths. Okay. And what forbearance does not destroy are just of meditation. So forbearance destroys discards of seeing only if it's a discard that is eliminated by meditation, then it is eliminated by what we call knowing. You've got Dharma knowing, Dharma forbearance, subsequent knowing, subsequent forbearance, as we'll go into in the next chapter. At any rate, so what's eliminated by Dharma knowing and subsequent knowing are discards of meditation. So the nature of the path of meditation is all knowing. The forbearance is just on the path of seeing. Okay? So now to go over the commentary, we'll give you a second time through this, because this is also, again, another something that's hard to get your mind around at first sometimes. So the commentary reads, well, then are the discards of seeing definitely discarded by seeing? In other words, as I said, if you have like the discards of seeing of desire, can they be eliminated by people on the worldly path of meditation or not? And here it says it is not definite. They can be, they might not be. So there are two types of discards that are destroyed. Those destroyed by forbearance, that means those that are discarded on the path of seeing, and those destroyed by knowing, which means those that are discarded on the path of meditation, right? So these are the two types. On the path of seeing, you discard it by the type of wisdom called forbearance. On the path of meditation, you discard it by the type of wisdom called knowing. So the first, that is the discards destroyed by forbearance, is equivalent to the discards of seeing, and the second, those destroyed by knowing, is equivalent to the discards of meditation. The discards born on the peak of existence that forbearance destroys are definitely discards just of seeing. So on the peak of existence, that highest level of the form realm, you have the discards of the desire and so forth, and view of the self and so forth, that are discards of seeing, that are on the level of the peak of existence, the fourth level of formless. And those are only discarded by the path of seeing. The reason is because there is no higher worldly meditation. It's the peak of existence, right? And therefore, there's no other meditation that can eliminate them, right? So therefore, those discards of seeing on the peak of existence can only be eliminated by the noble path of seeing, not by the worldly paths of meditation. But those on the other 8 levels that forbearance destroys can be discarded by both the path of seeing and the path of meditation. So on the other 8 levels, that would be desire, 4, form, and the first 3 are formless. Those discards of seeing can be discarded by the path of seeing and the path of meditation. So the path of seeing is easy. It's when you see the noble truths and you discard them. That's fairly easy. The path of meditation, you've got 2 parts. You've got when nobles see it on the transcendent path, and when ordinary beings see it on the worldly path. So when nobles discard them, they're discarded by the path of seeing. So in other words, they see the truth, and that discards those antidotes. And when the childish, that means when worldly beings on the path of ordinary individuals on the path of worldly path of meditation, they discard them by the path of meditation. Okay. In other words, it's saying that you can eliminate these levels of desire and view of self and so forth by meditation if you're doing the dhyanas. It's not a permanent, but they can be eliminated. So those discards of meditation that forbearance does not destroy are discards just of the path of meditation. So there also are the levels of desire, anger, ignorance, and pride that are discards of meditation, right? Those are discards of meditation, so they can't be destroyed by forbearance, because forbearance is a type of wisdom only on the path of seeing. So they're not destroyed by forbearance. And the reason is because it is impossible for the path of seeing to abandon a discard of meditation. The path of seeing is kind of doing the more surface level, as we talked about. The path of meditation is doing the more deeper level. So what this is saying is that the path of seeing is good. It eliminates those obstacles, but it eliminates a certain number of obstacles, but it doesn't do everything. There are some that you have to go through the path of meditation in order to discard. Okay? And then when you discard the afflictions, then you gain the cessation and the results and so forth. So the path of meditation can be either defiled or undefiled. So the defiled of these two, the former, that is the defiled path of meditation, is the 8 preparations for the levels from the first jhana to the peak, which take coarseness and purity as their aspects. So what we're saying here is on the path of meditation, when you're doing the path of meditation on the worldly level, you go through the 8 different levels of desire, and then the 4 levels of form, and the first 3 are formless. And you look, and when you're on the level of desire, then you develop stable shamatha meditation. You look at the idea, at the phenomena of the desire realm, and you say, these are really coarse. They're painful and coarse. The dhyanas are much more subtle and they are blissful. So I want to meditate on the dhyanas. And so then you are meditating on the dhyana. And so then by seeing the desire realm as coarse and meditating upon the first level of dhyana as being subtle, then you develop the wish to achieve that, and you develop the meditation. Your meditation gets stronger, and you eliminate all the meditation discards of all the discards of the desire realm, all attachment to the desire realm. And then when you're on the first level of dhyana, when you want to go to the second dhyana, you see the first level of dhyana as coarse, the second level of dhyana as subtle, as better. And then you meditate to eliminate the discards of the first level of dhyana, and so forth, all the way up to the peak of existence. So that's the worldly path, or the defiled path of meditation. The undefiled path of meditation is subsequent knowing of path, and so forth. So this means that when you get through all of the moments of the path of seeing, these are 16 moments or 16 phases. Oh, excuse me, I should show that again. The second, the undefiled path of meditation, is the subsequent knowing of the path, and so forth. So here, what this means is when you're on the path of seeing, you go through the first 15 moments or 15 stages of the path of seeing, and then you get to the last moment, and that's called knowing, right? Subsequent knowing, the subsequent knowing of path. That's the 16th moment of realization. And then from then on, you no longer have forbearance, you just have the knowings when you're in meditation. And so that is the beginning of the path of meditation for the noble beings. So this is something we will describe in greater detail in a few days when we get to the 6th chapter. We will have more charts about it then, but today we're just kind of going on it. So if it kind of, if you were kind of thinking, what does this sentence mean? Just take a note now and come back to it after we've gone through this section on the 16 moments of clear realization in the 6th chapter. Then you can come back and look at this, and this will be much clearer. Okay, so there we are. We've got now we've been through that. That completes the classifying the kernels as 98. So now we go through the kernels as classifying them all in general as 98. Well, we have specific classifications of some of the types of kernels. And those are in particular views and pride. So this is the next section, specifically classifying views and prides. And there are 2 topics here. Classifying views and classifying pride. So these are the 2 sections, right? So we're going to first talk about the classifying views. Now we've already gone over the names, the personality view, wrong view, extreme view, and so forth. Now we actually get to talk about what each of them is. So when you classify the views, there are 3 topics. The nature of each of the 5 views. The second is the reason why the 5th view is not a discard of seeing the origin, the 5th view being the view of overesteeming the discipline and the path, discipline and austerity. And the 3rd section is classifying them as the 4 erroneous, because we have talk in the sutras about erroneous views. So what are the erroneous views? So that's the 3 main sections, or the 3 parts of this. So we first have the part. The first part is the nature of each of the 5 views. So what are the 5 views? We've got personality, extreme view, wrong view, overesteeming the low, and over-esteeming discipline and austerity. So what are each of these 5? So that goes to them in order. And I think if I resize my screen, I might get that whole verse on one page. Can I do that? Oh, there we are. So as me, mine, permanent and ceasing, as non-existent, over-esteeming the low, and viewing what is not cause or path as such, these are 5 views. So the 5 views, personality, so it goes through each of them as in order. So viewing something as me and mine is personality view. Viewing it as permanent or ceasing is extreme view. As being non-existent is wrong view, a denial of existence. Overesteeming the low is the view of overesteeming the low. And viewing what is not the cause or path as such is overesteeming discipline and austerity. So these are in brief, the name of these 5, or the meanings of these 5 views. So what is the nature of the 5 views, it says in the commentary? When focusing on the aggregates of grasping, these are the 5 aggregates that we grasp at as being me or as being mine, and we view them as being me or mine, that is personality view. So here, personality view, I'm going to kind of go on a little digression here. Personality view is a translation of this term that comes from the Theravada tradition. So in Pali, this is called Sakaya Drishti. In Sanskrit, this is called Satkaya Drishti, very similar words, just Pali is a little bit easier to pronounce, Sakaya Drishti. So, and then Sanskrit, Satkaya Drishti. And in Tibetan, it's Jigsolatawa. So when we look at it, now Vasubandhu in his auto commentary here has a nice description of why it's called Satkaya Drishti. And so when you talk about the word Satkaya, it has 2 parts. And the first part, Sat, is short for, is kind of derived from, or so he says. There are lots of very fanciful Sanskrit etymologies, but he says that the Sat here refers to a verb that, to a word, is a short form of a word that means transitory, fleeting, impermanent. So this means that you're looking at something that is impermanent. And you're looking at that, and what you're looking at is the kaya, which we all know that is like the word for bodies, particularly as the Buddhist bodies, but it also means like a collection. So you're looking at an impermanent collection, and you're seeing it as a whole thing, right? And so then seeing, that's me, or it's mine. So when you're looking at something as being me or mine, then you're focusing on something that is fleeting and a collection as if it were a whole, a real whole thing. So that, and then attaching the idea of it being me to that. So in specific, you're looking at the 5 aggregates of your own being. You're looking at your form, that is at your body, and saying, that's me. You're looking at your feelings and saying, that's me. Or your conception saying, that's me. Your formations as being me, or your consciousness and saying, that's me or mine. Or you might be looking at the body and saying, I dwell in the body. I dwell in my feelings and so forth. Or you might be looking at the body and saying, that's mine. It's my body. You might be looking at your feelings and formations and conceptions and consciousness as being mine. And you might be thinking, these various different ways of looking at these. And so these are called the view of personality or the view of self. In other words, you're looking at some aspect of yourself and saying, that's me. And there are different levels. And there's the basic idea, but basically we're talking about generally usually a kind of a learned idea of there being a self or a soul, but there's also can be an instinctive idea of just generally grasping at a me. Well, these are all included in this view of personality. The view of personality is synonymous with a view of self. So when you're looking at a self and you say, oh, that's me, then that is a view of self. So generally we're talking about viewing our own personal selves. Not necessarily, I mean, we also talk about, you can also, I think, you could apply this to a view of others as being individuals and so forth, but primarily we're talking about here in the texts as looking at your own 5 aggregates and saying that they're you, yours, the basis for you, or something that you possess, or the place where you dwell. And so these are the different levels of the view of personality. In Tibetan, they translated the Sanskrit word very literally, according to Vasubandhu's description, and they called it Jigtsolatawa. And so a lot of translators will also translate it literally into English as the view of transitory collection. And when you say the view of the transitory collection, it's good for the meaning, but it is a mouthful and it's not immediately apparent what it means. And it also, if you're talking about it according to the Tibetan tradition, the northern tradition, it's fine. In the Pali tradition, it's different. So when I was working on the translation, it seemed to me that the view of personality from the Pali tradition was maybe more immediately understandable for people. So that's why I've used it in my translations. Okay, so that's personality view, the first. So that is when focusing on the aggregates of grasping, that is the 5 aggregates, particularly your own, in your own continuum, viewing them as me and mine is personality view. That's the first. And then viewing that me itself as permanent or ceasing is extreme view. So the two extreme views are eternalist view. I have a soul and it is permanent, eternal. That is eternalist. There's a me right now, but when I die, that me is going to end. My body is decomposed, my mind will cease, and that's it. This is what we call a nihilist view. And as I mentioned yesterday, nihilist is not exactly a literal translation of the term, but I think it's a decent word for English. Really, it's saying the view that it's going to cease, a view of ceasing. That is extreme view. And then viewing the truth of suffering and so forth as being non-existent is wrong view. In other words, wrong view is denying the truth of suffering, denying that there are other worlds, future lifetimes, denying karmic cause and effect. It's saying all of that is wrong. None of it's true. That is all called a wrong view. So in particular, we're talking about denials of the Four Noble Truths, denials that there are arhats and Buddhas and other great beings, denying that there are future lifetimes, denying karmic cause and effect. That's all wrong views. So that all of that word phrase there and so forth includes a lot of different things. Then overestimating the low, personality view and the others. And here I think actually in the text here, I'm putting a little blue highlight. There's a comma there. Excuse me, I've lost it. The comma that I've highlighted in blue should probably come out. So what is low? It's personality view and others. So in other words, when you're looking at the other views and you think that your personality view, your wrong views, or your nihilistic views, you think that those are great views. They're perfect. Like this is what our teacher taught, and this is excellent. That is overestimating the low, thinking that it is better than it actually is. That is one explanation. Another explanation that is given in the auto commentary is that the low means all defiled dharmas. So it means when you look at anything defiled and think, this is great, this is wonderful, this is what I need, this is what I have to do. For example, you might think to yourself that fishing is the greatest and that you have to spend all your time fishing and killing fish. That would be overestimating. Think that that's the best thing that could possibly be done. That would be overestimating the low also in that interpretation. But primarily what we're concerned about here are the different views taught by by other philosophical systems. And so clinging to those would be overestimating the low. That's overestimating the view. And then viewing what is not the cause, Indra, the Lord of living creatures, Brahma, and so forth, as the cause. So in other words, thinking that there is some sort of a God, a creator God, who created the world. So that could be Indra or Brahma in the Hindu tradition or whatever, whichever God, or it could be a Christian God or the Muslim God. I guess they're kind of the same. So viewing something that is not the cause as the cause. That's viewing Indra or the Lord of living creatures as being permanent and whole, being real existing independent beings. And so it is, so that is viewing the cause. It's actually viewing, even it said viewing them as the cause, it's actually a discard of the truth of suffering. And then viewing what is not the cause of high realms, entering the fire and water and so forth as the cause of high realms. So this means thinking that you're going to achieve the higher realms if you undergo austerities such as entering fire, which means when you are in India and the sun is extremely hot, you build 4 fires, one in front, one in back, and one to either side. You light these 4 blazing fires, and then you sit underneath the hot sun surrounded by 4 fires, and you sweat out all your impurities. That's one view. They say that this is a way of achieving the higher realm. Or entering the water means to go bathe in the Ganges and so forth, right? So thinking that just bathing yourself and so forth is the cause of the higher realms. Or it is viewing what is not the path, that is mere Shila and austerity, as such, as overesteeming discipline and austerity. So in other words, thinking that all you have to do is keep discipline. All you have to do is hold vows and practice discipline and undergo hardships and penance, and then you'll be able to achieve the higher realms and liberation. Actually, it says here, mere Shila, mere discipline and austerity. Shila is the Sanskrit word for, that we translate as discipline in English. Shila is important, but it is not all you need. In addition to your Shila, in addition to your discipline, you also need to have the view and meditation. So they are causes, but they are not causes on their own. So they are not the path in and of themselves. So thinking that only they are the path is the wrong view of overesteeming discipline and austerity. So these are the natures of each of the 5 views, right? So we've got the personality view of viewing the aggregates of me or mine. There's the wrong view of either nihilist or, nihilist or the wrong view of nihilism or eternalism. We've got the wrong views of denying karmic cause and effect, the 4 noble truths and so forth. We've got the view of overesteeming the lower, overesteeming view, which in particular means thinking of the wrong and the lower views as being the best views. And then the view of overesteeming discipline and austerity, which means looking at thinking of there being a creator God, thinking that there is a creator God, thinking that methods that do not actually lead to liberation. That's those 5. So in other words, that one is kind of looking at both the at the nature of the path. And so that was, so if we remember our dividing into 98, right? We've got the overesteeming discipline and austerity is discarded by discarded by seeing the truth of suffering, and it's also discarded by seeing the truth of path. So it's discarded by the path of seeing, because when you see a God as being like a single whole being, like that misunderstanding is discarded when you see the path, when you see that everything is empty and selfless, that all beings are empty and selfless, that there is no self. So that's why it's included as a discard of seeing. The reason why it is included as a discard of meditation is because it's looking at things that are not the path as being the path. So it's mistakenly misunderstanding the path and then mistakenly engaging that misunderstanding. So that is why it is also discarded by seeing the path. So that is why it's on those 2 categories. Okay. So those are the natures of the 5 views. So why is that 5th one then not a discard of seeing the origin? So here the issue is you're viewing Indra and God as being the cause of liberation and so forth. So why isn't that seeing the truth of origin? So here's what we describe here. So the verse reads, since clinging to Ishvara, etc., as cause initially mistakes them to be permanent and self, just seeing suffering discards it. So since clinging to Ishvara is actually, Ishvara is kind of like just the Hindi way of the Sanskrit way of saying God. So when you cling to God and so forth as being the cause, then what you're doing is you're engaging them mistakenly. You've got a wrong idea and you're thinking about the gods as being either permanent or as being a self or as being both. And so because you are thinking them as being a whole thing that is permanent in self, it is discarded only by seeing suffering. It's not discarded. It's already gone by the time you get to seeing the origin. So, if, as it says in the commentary, if viewing as a cause what is not a cause and is overesteeming discipline and austerity, why is it also not a discard of seeing origin? So if you remember, when you have 10 and 7, 7 and 8, one of the three views that is not included on origin is overesteeming discipline and austerity, right? So why is it not included there? This is because clinging to or holding Ishvara, that is, God and so forth, the things that are not causes as being causes, initially engaged by the power of mistaken views. So you're seeing them mistakenly as being permanent or as being a self, right? You've got this mistaken idea of God as being a permanent self. And so directly seeing the characteristics of the, I'm not showing my screen. I'm sorry about that. I always forget when I'm sharing or not. Resume share. So when you, if viewing as a cause, what is not a cause is overesteeming discipline and austerity. Why is it not also discarded seeing origin, it says in the commentary here? This is because clinging to or holding Ishvara, etc., as things that are not causes as causes, initially engage them by the power of mistaken view. So you have a wrong view, a mistaken idea, and you engage that idea because of that. You see them as being permanent or as a self. So when you directly see the characteristics of the truth of suffering, that eliminates clinging to permanence and a self, because clinging to permanence is an extreme view. Clinging to a self is personality view. And so that is gone. And when that has been abandoned, then viewing Ishvara and so forth, who are not causes to be causes, is also discarded, because when you realize that actually God is not a single permanent self, then if there's no God who's a single permanent self, how can there be the creator God? So that is already abandoned. When that has been abandoned, viewing Ishvara and so forth, who are not causes to be causes, is also discarded. So for that reason, just seeing suffering discards it, that is the clinging to Ishvara and so forth as causes. So that is the view. That is why that view is in the view of is discarded by seeing suffering and by seeing the path. Okay, is that clear? Anyways, we'll move on. Now, another thing is we've got the 4 erroneous views, and these are talked about frequently in many different levels of Buddhist scriptures. These are the views of things of being a self, permanent, blissful. What are they? Clean and blissful. Okay, self, permanent, clean, and blissful. These are the 4 erroneous views, and they're mentioned in sutra after sutra. They come up in all sorts of different texts. So what are they? And how are they fixed? If we talk about erroneous views, well, we talked about 5 views, and you've got 4 erroneous views. So how do these 2 go together? That's what we're talking about in this next topic. And there are 2 points here. Among 3 views, there are 4 errors, since they're mistaken, since they're thoughts that judge, since they exaggerate. Or that last one, since they exaggerate, you could also translate that one, and I'll probably, when I revise the translation, I'll probably change it, since they are projections. They're projections on the extra thought. So here. So there are the 4 errors, and the reason there are 4 errors, the 4 errors are being self, permanent, clean, and blissful. And there are 3 views that contain these 4 errors. And the reason why they're errors is because they're mistaken, they're wrong ideas, they're thoughts that judge something and say, oh, this is what it is, judge it as being something, and they're projections, taking something that is not and projecting it as being something else. So that's the 4 errors. And so then the question here is, well, then must the errors, that is the four errors, necessarily be just the two errors of self-impermanence, you ask? Not necessarily. So from among the three views, and here the three views that are mentioned are personality view, extreme view, and holding the view supreme, there are four errors that are presented as kind of one set. You've got one set of errors, and of these four errors, and it's included in the three views. So clinging to a self, we have the four errors of what self, permanent, clean, and blissful. These are included in the first one, clinging to a self, is presented from personality view. In other words, it is personality view. It's part of personality view. Personality view is seeing as me and mine. So here, viewing it as a self is the clinging to me in particular. Okay, that's the first error. The view of permanence is presented out of extreme view. In extreme view, we've got two parts. We've got the view of eternalism and the view of nihilism, right? So here we're talking about the eternalist view. That's the view of permanence. And the views of the clean and blissful are presented out of holding views supreme. So this is when you think of things that are not clean and blissful as being clean and blissful. Your ideas of, in the text, it often talks about viewing bodies as being clean when actually they're made up of filth, as we will talk about in the 6th chapter at length. And seeing them as being clean and seeing them as being blissful. So that is the views of clean and blissful, and these are holding view supreme, right? Or the viewing blissful can also be viewing the pleasures of the higher realms as being inherently blissful and desirable, instead of seeing them as suffering. That's holding their views, the view of this as being supreme. So those are the four errors. So then the question is, well, then the other afflictions are not presented as errors. So why are these three presented as errors, you say? They're presented as errors because of three reasons. First, they're solely mistaken about their focus. They're looking at it mistakenly. They're what we call mistaken engagements, looking at something that is not a self as being a self, looking at something that is not permanent as being permanent, and looking at something that is not clean or blissful as being clean or blissful. They're mistaken. And they're thoughts that judge. They say, this is self, this is permanent, this is that. They're judging it. And since they exaggerate, or they're projections, because you're projecting an idea of self or permanence or clean or something onto something that is not. So it's kind of making up. So other afflictions do not fulfill one or more of those reasons, so they're not presented as errors. So this is basically explaining why in the sutras, when the Buddha talked about the four errors, he talked about being permanent, self-permanence, clean and blissful over and over and over again. And so why did he speak about those? Well, this is the three reasons why those are included here, and not other views. For example, you might say that the view of overesteeming discipline and austerity. Well, that is a mistaken. It's kind of a judgment, and it's mistaken about the focus. So why isn't it erroneous? Well, it's not considered an error here because when you're viewing discipline and austerity as the path, you're partially right. So it's partially right. So it's not in total projection. It's not like when you're looking at aggregates that have no single self-identity and projecting the idea of a self on them. So this is, and it's similar with the other afflictions. So those are the four views. Now there's an additional point here. The next thing is the additional point, and this is saying, well, okay, we've got those. It says you've got that additional. You've got these four errors, but in the sutras and in generally the way people think, we don't just talk about views as being erroneous. We also talk, in particular in Sanskrit or in the Indian languages, we talk about your mind being erroneous and conception being erroneous. And don't we talk about other things being erroneous? So here it's described here. It's saying that mind and conception from their power. So what this is saying, that when you're talking about mind being erroneous or a conception, an idea being erroneous, then it's because it is associated with or concurrent with that view. So you have the view of personality, and at the same time as the view of personality, you also have a conception It's a different mental factor than that view. It's the concept. It's the aggregate of conception, actually, and that looks at the self and says, "This is a self." It predicates the idea of a self, and that is erroneous because it's associated with that wrong view of a self. Since the idea is associated with the view. The view is, as I mentioned yesterday, the view is classified as a type of progeny. So personality view is a mistaken type of progeny. And the aggregate of conception is like what we usually think about as like ideas. It's saying, this is that. So I'm saying, this is me. That conception is erroneous because it's associated with that view. And then at the same time, there's also a mind. There's your consciousness. And that consciousness is erroneous because it's associated with that wrong view. So this is why we say mind and conception can be considered erroneous. So the commentary here reads, well then, both mind and conception must not be errors because they do not have the thoughts that judge. And if you agree, it is a contradictory of the sutras which tell of both erroneous mind and erroneous conception, you say. So the thoughts and the conceptions, they don't have those thoughts that judge. So they're not considered. So they can't be conception, they say here. And what the point is here, it's not contradictory because the mind and conception are considered concurrent with those erroneous views. They are concurrent with the erroneous views. So they themselves are not the thoughts that judge and so forth, but they are concurrent with them. And so they are therefore considered erroneous from their power, right? So then the question is, well, at the same time as you have that, you have all sorts of other factors, like you have feelings. Now, feelings here doesn't mean like feelings as we often speak about in English is kind of a synonym for emotions. What we're talking about here are sensations: pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, mentally pleasant, mentally unpleasant. And these can be, therefore, these sensations or feelings are therefore erroneous because they're concurrent with those views. And the answer is that no, they're not, because in common parlance, you don't say that feelings are erroneous. So that doesn't make them erroneous. In other words, you're only using the terms for the things that people actually use them naturally. You're not making up terms. So that is the four errors. And the main point here is you've got the four errors of being self, permanent, clean, and blissful. These four errors come up over and over again in the sutras, and they're considered these three views: the personality view, extreme view, and the overesteeming overesteeming the view or overesteeming the low. Okay, so that's the point of that section. So that's talking about the different classifications of the views. So now we've got to something that's kind of interesting here, is we've got the prides, the different types of pride. So what is pride? Well, pride is basically a sense of feeling, inflating yourself, thinking, I'm great, I'm better, look at me, I'm really something, right? That's what we think of as pride. So the actual classification of pride here, we talk about pride, there are 3 points here. There's the actual classification of pride. There's what antidotes discard them. And then the third part is why discards of meditation do not manifest themselves in nobles, even though they have not been discarded, which is not necessarily directly related to pride, but comes right after it in the text. I'm not sure if we'll get to that one this morning. Maybe we'll just stop after we've spoken about pride. So we'll talk about the first is the actual classification. So the prides are 7, 9 types 3. So basically we're saying that when you look at pride in terms of its aspect, in other words, kind of how it seems or how it feels or what sort of form it takes, then there are 7 different types of pride, or you can say that there are 9 different types of pride. So the point is that it's not just views that it can be divided further. Pride can also be divided, can also be classified. As it says in the commentary, there are not only classifications of views, pride can be classified as well. There are 7 types of pride. Pride, superior pride, more proud than pride, pride in thinking me, pride of exaggeration, pride in thinking almost, and pride and mistaken pride. So the first of these is pride, right? It's just regular pride. That's the conceit of thinking that you're better than an inferior and that you're equal to your equals. So it's like, yeah, I'm better than them. You know, someone who is your inferior, thinking that you're better than them. Then the second one is thinking that you are superior to equals. So there are a bunch of you who are all pretty much the same. Saying, there are all these other translators, but I'm the best. If I were to say that, I'd be wrong. And it would be this type of superior pride, right? So that's superior pride. And then the third is thinking one is, let me see, can I get this all on one screen if I resize the screen? Oh, yes. Oh, I can get most of them on a screen. Okay, so here we are. So the third is thinking that one is superior. Here, did you see where I'm highlighting it? The third is thinking one is superior to their betters. So there's someone who is clearly better than you, but you think you're better than them. For example, if you play tennis and you think to yourself, I'm better at tennis than now, what is her name? Naomi Osaka. I'm better than her. That's pride of thinking that you're better to your superior, because actually she'll really, if you got on the court with her, she'd probably just beat you straight away. Then there's the pride in thinking me. This is the pride of thinking me. This is me. I'm great. So just for being full of yourself from thinking me. And the fifth is the pride of exaggeration or pride of projection. So this is the conceit of thinking you have attained clairvoyant powers when you have not. You have no clairvoyant powers, but you say, I can read minds, I can see things far away, I can tell you the past and future, but you actually don't have them. There's actually no reason to think that you have them. So that is the pride of conceit of thinking you have attained clairvoyant power. So that's the pride of exaggeration. The next is the pride of thinking almost. So the sixth that says here is the pride of thinking almost is the conceit of thinking that you're almost as good as your superiors. It's like thinking, okay, I play tennis, I'm pretty good. I'm almost as good as Naomi Osaka. I'm not as good as her, but I'm almost as good as her, right? So that is actually just, what do we say? That's actually overestimating your ability, saying, I'm almost as good as her. And the seventh is thinking you have qualities you do not. Now we had this, so the seventh is the, what did I call it here? Mistaken pride. We have the pride of exaggeration and mistaken pride. So here, these two, let me highlight them in a different color. Pride of exaggeration and mistaken pride. So both of these are similar in thinking that you have qualities such as clairvoyant powers when you do not. But the difference between the two of them is that in the pride of exaggeration or the pride of projection, I might change the translation. In the pride of exaggeration, what you're doing, you don't have any basis for saying that you have the qualities. You're just saying, I have them, when you do not. It's completely mistaken. And then the last one is mistaken pride. And this is when you have some basis for thinking that you might have those qualities. And so you think, I do have those qualities, but you don't actually have them. So what's happening is you're mistaking a quality that you actually have for being more than it is. So to give you an example of this is an example that comes from the Vinaya. It talks from the question about telling lies about superhuman qualities. The Buddha made a rule that if you tell a lie about having superhuman qualities, then you are no longer a bhikshu, you cannot stay with the Sangha, you are expelled, you're out. That's done. There's no choice. So there are these two monks who went off to go, they went off to meditate. They meditated, and their meditation was really good. And they had these really profound experiences, and they thought to themselves, I've become an arhat. And the one thought that, and the other thought it. And then after some time, they got up from their meditation, and they each said to each other, I've become an arhat. You've become an arhat. Then they were so excited. We've become arhats. This is excellent. We have to go see the Buddha and tell him that we've become arhats. Now, actually, they just had a meditation experience that they'd mistaken for arhatship, but it was actually just a temporary experience. And so they were walking along down the road, and as they were going down the road, there were bhikshus, right? There were guys, and they saw a pretty girl. And they said, oh, she's looking nice. Like, oh, no, we're not arhats after all. We still have attachment and lust to pretty girls. What are we going to do? We've told lies. Now we've lost our vows. And so they went to the Buddha, and the Buddha said to them, they told the story to the Buddha. They said, have we really lost our vows for telling lies? If we said we were arhats when we weren't, have we lost our vows? And the Buddha made a qualification on the rule that if it is this type of mistaken pride, then you have not broken your vows. Okay? So this type of mistaken pride is actually really important for us who are keeping vows to understand, because no matter which level of the pratimoksha vows, whether it's the 5 lay precepts, or the novice vows, or the bhikshu vows, or bhikshuni vows, or whatever level of vows you're taking, you have to be really careful about saying that you have qualities that you don't. Because if you tell a lie about having qualities that you don't, you've lost it. Your vows are gone. So you have to be really careful. So it's always very important. This is not entirely the topic here, but it's related. When you talk about it's always better not to talk about your qualities. You should never say things like, I've realized impermanence. I've realized Mahamudra. Just don't say it. Better to keep your mouth shut. You could be wrong. At any rate, but the reason is that you don't break the vow. Now, if you have some sort of meditative experience and you think, I've realized Dzogchen, fine. If you actually have realized Dzogchen, fine. But if you think you've realized it and you tell someone else you have realized it, then you're telling an untruth. But it's based on mistaken pride, so you don't lose your vows at that point. Still, it's not good. So it's always better to just sort of keep your mouth shut about these sorts of things. There are lots of stories when you read the biographies of great masters, there are stories about many of the great masters. When they're children, they tell all sorts of stories about seeing things and knowing things. And then at some point, some master says, don't you tell those stories. And after that, they don't tell the stories. So that is the 7 types of pride. But here it says, in the root, it says 9 types 3. So we've also got 9 types of pride in another treatise. So as it says here, in the treatise Jnana Prasthana, there are 9 aspects of pride that are taught. And these 9 types are included in 3, the pride, superior pride, and the pride of thinking almost. So what are these 9 types of pride? It's not really brought out here in the commentary. It's given more discussion in the auto commentary and the longer commentaries. So what this type of the 9 types of pride is, the first, hang on, I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right thing. Just stop that for a moment. Open resource, oh yeah. Oh, it's taking a while to open that file. You've got the 9 types of vows are what? The 9 types of pride are when you're, so basically the 9 types of pride, here I am, are thinking that the first is when you're thinking, I am the best. I'm the greatest. That's the first type of pride. I'm the greatest. The second thing is thinking that I'm the same as them, or I'm equal to them. And the third is thinking I'm less. I'm lesser. So these are three types of pride. I'm thinking I'm great, I'm their equals, or I'm their lesser. And so these three are included in the three types of pride of the wait a minute, where did we go? Too many files open. In the pride, superior pride, and pride and think of almost. So the first of these, the pride of thinking I'm the best, is obviously the pride of thinking yourself superior. So that's just regular pride. The second one is thinking that, what do we say? So there's this pride of superiority. And the third is the pride of thinking almost. So when you're thinking, so the third one is when you're thinking I'm the least, it's like you're thinking of a group of people. For example, when you think of tennis, I've been using the example of tennis, so right. So you think that you're a tennis player, and among all tennis players, you know you're not good. I'm not the greatest, but I'm a tennis player. Not like a Naomi Osaka, but I'm in that same group. Now, this is the pride of saying almost. Or probably a more relevant example is when you think of yourself as being a member of the Sangha. You have your bhikshu vows or something, and you say, okay, I'm the least of monks, but I'm a monk. That is a bit of pride, right? So that's the pride of thinking almost. Then another aspect would be, so those are the first three. The first three is saying, I'm the greatest, I'm the same, or I'm the least. And then the second type is when you say, there are people who are superior to me. There are those who are superior to me. The first is the second threat. There are people who are my equals, and there are people who are who are my lessers. So these, again, are these three types of pride: the pride, superior pride, and the pride of thinking almost. The first one is the pride of thinking almost. The second is just regular pride, and the third is the pride of superiority. And then the second one is, the last set of three is thinking, there are those who are lesser than me. There are those who are superior to me. There are those who are equal. There are those who are my equals. And so these, again, fit in these three categories of pride, superior pride. So the first is superior pride. The second is this pride in thinking almost. And the third is the pride of equality. So that's how these 9 types fit in 3. So this is just brought up briefly in the root and described in many commentaries, but it's not really described in the Wangchuk Dorje commentary. So I'm just passing that along for sake of being thorough. So I think that is enough for this morning. And we will leave it here. So we have spent this time discussing the Dharma. Why don't we actually, at this point, I think we've still got a little bit of time. And since we're on Zoom and it's easy, why don't we see if anyone has any questions from our Zoom audience? I still have to finalize how we're going to do the questions from the YouTube. It's basically a question of figuring out which email address to send questions to. Once we figure that out, of course, I'll let all of you know. So right now, those of you who are watching on Zoom, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. So seems like perhaps today we don't have any questions. So if that is the case, then we will recite our dedication prayers. Is that okay? Or just one more chance for questions? Right now, maybe it's just too much right now. If you think of a question later, then we can have more time on other days. Okay. So now let's please think to yourself that we are, where did that go? Hang on a second. I have to get that presentation showing again. Where did it go? Okay, hang on. Please think to yourself that we need to dedicate all of the merit from speaking to and listening to the Dharma today to the benefit of all of our mothers, all sentient beings throughout space. And with this motivation, please recite the dedication prayers. Osanam de tam je se bani tobne ne peranam pam chete kega na chi balong chobai sipe tsoledro kunyo sho chancho semcho rinpoche maje panam je gyurji je panayam ba me paryam gongne gondo bhawar sho. Okay, so thank you very much. Okay, bye-bye.